Welcome back to another Beekeeping Buddies episode. I'm Steven.
I'm Luke.
This is our first episode for 2025. Happy New Year, man.
Happy New Year. Welcome to 2025, everybody.
We're going to have another giant year of beekeeping, aren't we?
Oh, my goodness. I hope so. With the cold in the past few days.
Oh, my God, dude.
I don't believe anything can survive out there. I don't understand how.
So for everybody following along at home, we here in the Midwest have had our 10 below period of temperatures.
Negative 25 wind chill. Right?
And it's just really cold.
It is painfully cold.
And it's when you get to these periods of time when you really remember that somehow the insulated hives, however insulated they are, have got to be better than just a pine box.
They have, especially, so you live in an older house, right? And the insulation in there is spotty.
My 100-year-old farmhouse struggles when it's single digits and below. At 10 below, my house loses temperature. My furnace runs 24/7, and I slowly lose. I lose about 3 degrees off my thermostat.
Yeah, and here, I have a newer house, and we still have rooms that are two sides out, like facing outward facing rooms, and it's cold in those rooms. It's noticeably cold. So I feel for the bees that survive right now. They're probably clustered real tight.
Real tight.
Yeah, I know that their metabolism right now is super high. 40 degrees is like their really nice low metabolism point.
Yeah.
So,
but it warmed up to 25, 30 today, and I tell you what, after having some days of -5 and -10 consistently, a sunny 30-degree day just feels like T-shirt weather.
It felt great. It's really nice.
But really, the main topic for this episode, we really have nothing going on in the yard these days because, it is the middle of winter. But at the very start of the new year, and I mean bam, January 2nd, you were off to the Bee Expo.
I was. North American Honeybee Expo.
It's the largest beekeeping expo in the country, I think.
I think so. One of, if not the largest.
And so we're going to do, most of our show is going to be dedicated to talking about, we're probably going to split this up into couple shows because there's a lot to cover. But we're going to give you some highlights from the show about what I did not attend. I had some unfortunate family difficulties go down over the holiday, so I did not attend. I had kind of intended to tag along so we could do some Beekeeping Buddies podcast things from the show. I understand you talked to a bunch of people about being on the show, and I think we're going to have those guests lined up in upcoming weeks.
Absolutely. Well, next week, actually, I'm going to go to the Yucatan Peninsula, and maybe I'll get
another trip report.
Yeah, I'll get another trip report. There are some beekeepers down there that I work with. I've known those guys for 10 years or more. I do bring back some Yucatan Peninsula Mayan honey every year.
Listen, I am still freaked out that it comes back in used plastic water bottles, drinking bottles.
They've upgraded now. They have sealed. They're new. They're like the first time used plastic bottles instead of the used taped up top water bottles. Yes. Yeah.
All right. Maybe I'll try some of that.
We've made some upgrades through the years. It's very green tasting. It's a green tasting honey, and those guys are super nice. I actually bring equipment down to them every year. So Hilco sometimes sponsors me with that. Sometimes it's just out of pocket. Those bees are, I would consider many of them Africanized. They are more aggressive. I have been stung. I've gone out and checked the hives. I never got video of it, but maybe I'll get video of it this year. I got video. I went out and looked at them, and just standing there next to the hive, not doing anything, very still, very calm, I got stung 3 times. So they're not the nicest of bees. They are way off. When I say into the jungle, it is an hour and a half drive from Cancun to get to the place.
Yeah, this is south into the Yucatan Peninsula.
Into the peninsula, and then another hour. That's where we stay, and then the place I visit them at is another hour in from that into the jungle. And then you walk another 20 minutes to get to the bees into the jungle through like a animal path that they have the bees on, and they pull They harvest every 2 weeks during the height of their season. So every 2 weeks they can go out and harvest.
But they're not that far off the equator, so it's basically spring or summer all year
round
for them. But
anyway,
we'll know more about them in some upcoming episodes after we've been there. I think we want to focus on our Bee Expo. Right off the rip, let's talk about what they call the honey show. And apparently the honey show is more than just bottles of honey. It is, in fact, what you were thinking 50 or 60 different categories of products?
Yeah, about 50. Yeah, I would guess 50 or 60 different categories of product, including everything from quilting, like needlework, needlepoint stuff, which my wife does, to candles, to poetry. There's poetry section.
Yeah. We didn't talk about the poetry.
We didn't. I didn't enter the poetry section. I haven't written poetry in a few years now, but I used to write poetry. I used to do that stuff. Photography, in decorated hives, anything beekeeping.
Art. There was an art category.
There's
wood,
like a specialty skill category. So like if you have a specialty skill, for instance, blacksmithing or laser cutting or woodworking.
That'd be interesting. And then alcoholic and non-alcoholic drinks.
Yeah, alcoholic, mixed alcoholic and non-alcoholic drinks, honey related, and mead.
Wait, I thought mead would just fall into the alcoholic category.
Separate categories, mead. So like you can have like a mixed honey drink. There's one out there that's a tequila mixed drink called a bee sting.
Okay.
So stuff like that. So you'd make up your own drink with honey in it. And
then of course straight up honey judging.
And
they all have 3 different colors, white, medium, dark.
Yep. And they have senior. They have 2 groups, senior and initiative or whatever, initiate. If you've never won first place, you can do the lower grades. And if you've won a first place, you can no longer enter the lower grades of honey judging. You have to go to the pros.
I remember, I forget what they called that. And my dad did classic cars at MG, and they always had if you'd already won with your car, you were put in the other class.
Yeah,
and that was always the other class that always got judged. Like, man, it was always just fractions of a point for just the minor stuff.
Yeah, and then the one I think I really like the most there is the black bottle. So it's just on taste.
Really?
Yeah. So it's a black container. You can't see the honey at all. It's just taste.
Interesting.
Yeah. So that one, and that's a much smaller quantity of honey. So now, of course, and that's very personalized. What you like may not be what I like, that kind of stuff.
So we mentioned the honey show because as just a regular hobbyist that wants to attend that show, there's a lot of categories there that you could have to get the kids involved in if they want to enter. Like the painted hive thing is an excellent opportunity to get kids involved in something in the beekeeping. You have to have all your stuff entered. Friday of the show. The show ran Thursday. It opened, and then sort of Sunday was sort of the wrap up. But noon on Thursday, you had to have all your stuff checked in on Friday.
Yep.
And then the actual judging was on Saturday, right?
Yeah, I think the judging was probably on Friday afternoon into Saturday, and then they opened up, and that's when you got all the results and ribbons and stuff. Yep. Saturday morning, they announced your name if you won stuff. I actually didn't I didn't think I was going to win anything, so I didn't go to that presentation. So it turns out I did win something. So I had my name called and wasn't there. So
you got
first place for decorated hive.
Decorated hive. It looks very nice.
Yeah, nice blue. It's got a scenic mountain road path on it and some stars and moon, and it's a very pretty one.
And there are hundreds of honey samples submitted, but there's only how many decorated hives?
Probably hive decoration, there's probably 10. So the judging was also pretty interesting. So first place, so say that there was like 100 things entered, and none of them meet specification for the requirements. Like none of them are shining examples. they may not give a first place or a second place.
I've heard of that before.
So for this, they will not give a first or second place if they don't think it meets, if it's not a first or second place. So to get a first place in this show, a National Honey Show, is a big deal.
Okay,
So.
and the judges, they take their judging seriously. They were all like qualified tasters, and because they're not just. There's the graded honeys, but there's also what were you saying, the mixed honeys or something? The
infused honeys, hot honeys. So there's hot honeys and the graded honeys. They're very specific on the things that they test for. So things even down to, is there honey on the inside of the lid? Because that honey should not have touched the inside of the lid.
But they do all the standard honey judging stuff. They put it under the
light. I forget what the light's called.
Special light that allows you to see if it's got any weird hairs and debris in there. One of the guys in our club, our local club, has one, and he always likes to bust it out for our year-end honey judging local club end of year banquet.
Yep.
But there's also a honey judging class that we had talked about.
Yeah, they had a couple of classes there.
Yeah.
But yeah, the honey judging class you could show up and sign up for and learn how to be a honey judge.
So there's a lot that goes into that, but there's lots of other categories that if you were wax categories and wax products categories and
candles. Candles won best of show this year. They were pretty amazing, intricate.
And then you had best overall in the show. I guess you got points for how many items you won, first, second, third.
Yeah, first, second, third got different point allocations, and then they added up all your points, and you got best of everything.
Show. Yeah. The other thing we were there for was it's always fun to walk around the vendor hall, if you will.
Yeah.
Because it's sort of the CES, the Consumer Electronics Show, where you go to the big trade show in Vegas, and you walk around and look at all the new products, the new widgets, the new and fancy thing. There's also SEMA, the big auto parts show that people might know of.
Yeah, for the gamers out there, there's Gen Con.
Gen Con.
There's all kinds of stuff out there that are.
But those giant trade shows, right? They have this giant vendor hall where you can walk around and look at all the latest and greatest new widgets that people of that community are bringing to market. And so for the Beekeeping Expo, the same thing applies. And so some highlights from walking around and the widgets that you brought home include.
Yeah, the Propola Hive Body. I think that's probably from Premier Bee Products. That's probably the one I'm most excited about. Propolis, if you all remember, is kind of like the bee glue that bees bring in. If you're looking at like a hive as like a human body, I would say that's the skin layer of the bees to keep things consistent, right? We kind of talk about that in an episode a while ago when we talk about the
vaccination stuff that was back on 17. We're going to circle back to that in a little bit.
Yeah. So that's something. The Propolis Hive Body, it encourages bees to build propolis on the inside of the hive. These are not insulated. These are wood ones. So that's the negative part of it. But I'm really interested in see how well they do compared to my insulated hives or just my straight woodenware.
And so their claim to fame is they seem to have developed a semi-proprietary surfacing that they have applied to the wooden product prior to assembly that has roughened up the inside surface of the hive that encourages the bees to want to propolize that surface.
Yeah, and they call that propolized area the propolis cavity, I believe. And it happens in trees too, right? It happens when bees. Steve and I do cutouts, right? It happens there too. You can see it in the cutout.
We definitely see it when we do cutouts.
Yeah. So they seal stuff up that they don't really like, and it also is antimicrobial, antibacterial.
And so that's a great follow-up is like, why would you care if the inside of your hive is covered in propolis? And that's because there's a lot of research that suggests the more propolis in the hive, the better the hive is going to react to maintaining virus loads and other problematic environmental pressures.
Yeah.
And that's best dealt with. Well, one of the better ways for them to deal with that is with propolis. And so the more contact they have with the propolis, then the healthier the hive should be. So that's why you might want a hive that has more propolis in it than not, and this apparently might be a way in order to achieve that. So we'll be putting that into action this year, and we'll certainly keep you updated on how that goes.
These are also wax dipped, so I've had interesting experiences with wax dipped equipment. Some of the stuff the cheap stuff off of Amazon hasn't always stood up well over time. Is what I'll say.
Because you've never painted the outside that was
supposedly. You don't paint them because they're supposed to be dipped for long enough. So wax dipping, that you put your hive body, right, your woodenware, into basically like boiling wax.
Yeah, it's super hot.
And you submerge it, and you need to submerge it for long enough for the sap and the water in the wood to get pressurized out by the heat so that the wax will come in and replace that.
Right.
And so if they don't do it for long enough, you just have
like
wood.
400-degree wax, right?
Yeah.
And so any moisture that's in the wood, you want to heat that wood up, so it has to stay in the tank submerged to like sort of steam out, boil out the water, and then what's left will be absorbed. The wood will want to absorb the wax into that same space.
So I think that's like a 15 to 20 minute process. So I'm interested to see what these guys have for that equipment. So I'll be watching them real close, and we can report back on them.
2 of those hives?
I think I have 2 of those hives. Yeah, and the nice part about them is that they were one of the vendors there that would ship to your house. So if you bought over, I think, $200, they would ship it to your house.
So that's an interesting note we should mention is the show typically has got some really smoking deals on buying physical items at the show. But a lot of the vendors have brought physical inventory to the show and do not want to try to ship the material to you from that location. So if you've gotten on a plane and you've flown to Kentucky in the middle of winter, you need to keep in mind what you can put in a suitcase to get home, or you need to be close enough to drive or drive something significantly large enough that you can load up all of the material that you hope to get, because there are some smoking deals on both woodenware, and then I know Hilco has got he typically is real aggressive in his discounts on the extractors and some of the other large equipment that he brings down and doesn't, I'll make you a deal so I don't have to take it home.
Yeah, like the honey bottle feeders or bottle fillers, those sell really well down there, I think. And yeah, he had all kinds. And I actually overbought when I was there. I had to ship some stuff home in boxes. So luckily,
you didn't pack it all up in the truck in the SUV.
My SUV was totally Tetrisized full of stuff. So yeah, I packed a lot of it up, but I shipped, I think, 2 boxes home of stuff.
You also brought home a new bottom board.
Yeah, the Apamane screen bottom boards. I actually saw another beekeeper locally that had these. So Bully Bee across the river, they have these, and it's got some really neat engineering to it. So things like a propolis collector a pollen collector is built into it. It probably could be a propolis collector if they got pissed off enough at it and you had to clean it off. But a pollen collector is built into it, so you can collect pollen instead of hanging off I think they're Chinese-made pollen collectors. I've used those too. They're pretty finicky to use, and if you leave any gaps for any bees in those, they will 100% use those gaps and avoid getting the pollen knocked off their legs, which is what a pollen collector does. Basically, their hind legs have pollen on them. The bees have to squeeze through a little hole. It knocks the pollen off the legs. The bees, Kelly says the bees cuss at me. But yeah, we collect the pollen, and it tastes like powdered flowers. So it's supposed to be really good for you.
If you're not looking it up at home, this has got it's got a slide-out tray underneath that you can put mineral oil in if you're in an area that has a lot of problematic hive beetles. So the entire floor is sort of it's not screened because it's all plastic, right? So it's perforated. That's the word I'm looking for. So the debris will fall down into the tray. The center section, probably half. There's a quarter on the very outside edges, the two edges, and the quarter is sort of they're sliding gates on the front. And so if you want to block off the pollen collection center portion, you can slide the gates over, and then you just have your regular entrances on the sides. So a quarter on each side, and then the other half in the middle is what is available if you have that open. So they would crawl in there and then go up through the center of the hive, and there's opening, and so there's this long, skinny tray underneath that you pull out. So I don't know how much volume you're going to get in that tray. I would guess that the cheap little plastic ones on the front that you may or may not have used in the past are probably maybe the same size, maybe a little larger.
I bet they're pretty close to volume. Now, the oil tray, too, technically, I bet you could overflow into the oil tray. Although I bet if you pull out that pollen trap in the back and get only access to that oil tray, the bees will just find a new entrance and just avoid everything. And,
yeah. My guess is you have to keep it intact for it to all work.
Yeah.
Which, that's the other reminder, right, is you can't expect to put this bottom board on older equipment. Like, your equipment has to be pristine. All of your edges have to be closed up. My equipment's starting to get a little long in the tooth. And so, I got corners that are busted out or rotted out. Right. And so I have a lot of alternate locations that they can kind of come and go as they choose.
It's a good marketing name for holes in their hive.
And so I was looking at this product. He's got one upstairs, and it occurred to me that I would have to really comb through my equipment to find some of my newest boxes that were still the most pristine in order to effectively use the bottom board for some of these features. Now, you could just use it as a regular bottom board. Now, there's got a landing board that you can flip up and block off the entrances too. But again, if you don't have pristine boxes that they can't come and go, then blocking off that entrance
not going to work.
You're not gaining anything that way.
But it's still they're pretty well engineered for what they are.
And you probably bought them specifically for the integrated pollen catch?
Yeah, I specifically bought them for the pollen catch because, one, I'm seeing a small uptick in my demand for that kind of stuff. And two, I want to be feeding my bees some pollen just because of new studies that we'll probably talk about in a later episode when we talk about some of our nutrition research.
Yeah, there was. We'll tease it here. One of the there were 7 talks on Thursday, 15 talks on Friday, and another 15 talks on Saturday. So there were, if you go there,
but you can only go to, and they have 3 at a time, so you can only go to 1
per time slot.
Per time slot.
Yeah,
and so there's a bunch that I missed. The good news is that they record all of them, and they're really. I watched the videos from last year. They're all professionally done. So really easy to understand, really good sound, and as part of the ticket price, and we're not being paid by anybody to do this. So, but as part of the ticket price, they do give you a link to the videos,
access to the videos,
or you can buy them separate.
Yeah,
it's $75 to buy them separate.
If you didn't attend, you could go ahead and order on your own. Because one of those was what we understand about bee nutrition through research by Dr. Prey Basu.
Yep.
Did I get that right?
I think so.
And so I think we're going to talk a little bit about that one on an upcoming episode. But there's a lot of good things there about the pollen that our bees eat.
Yeah, it was of all the ones I went to, that was the college level explanation of the chemical properties within pollen that make it important for your bees to have.
First off, let's talk about a talk given by Cory Stevens featuring at the center of this talk was the Apis Engineering supplied equipment that is used in instrumental insemination of honeybee queens.
Yeah. So he talked, and he used. So Cory, for those that don't know, Cory Stevens is a beekeeper, famously known for breeding queens. I believe he had a lot to do actually with the pro-line queens. So those are the ones that are queen biters, or not queen biters, sorry, mite biters, but also have high hygienic behavior. So bees that do really well with taking care of the hive and mites, and then the pro-line queens also crossbred with major commercial beekeepers' bees, because the major issue that they were running into with some of those bees was they don't produce a lot of honey when they become super hygienic. They put a lot more energy into not producing, to clean the hive instead of producing honey. So what they ended up doing is they've worked that out, and through selected genetics have a queen that's more responsive and offspring as a result more responsive to varroa mites in the hive.
So as part of this presentation, does Cory has one of these machines? He goes through this process himself?
He shows it up on the screen, right? It's mostly PowerPoint. Almost all the presentations are kind of death by PowerPoint. But yes, he goes through that whole presentation of going through and capturing the drones from the hives that are mature drones. Because if we remember back in our episode on drones, it takes a little while for those drones to mature. So they have to be a mature drone so that they can harvest the semen off the drones so that you have the correct genetics. Because the drone, if you remember, is basically a copy of the queen, a clone of the queen. And so you're harvesting that semen in like a micro pipette that is, and the process is
hundreds. You're capturing these drones, and then you're having to
tear off their heads,
extract the semen from hundreds of drones, in order to get a volume that's viable for you to work with.
Right, and then you capture your queens, your virgin queens, and then you set them up. You have to gas them with CO2 and set them up in instrumentation to make sure. And this all has to be very clean. The other portion of this, so bees, actually lots of creatures, when you tend to knock them out, tend to poop everywhere, and so you have to be very careful with the drones because they'll poop, and you have to be clean with them. And the queen, when you knock her out, you got to make sure that she's not going to poop everywhere. So everything's got to be very clean, and then you are instrumentally inseminate the queen with the correct amount of semen that you've collected off of all of these drones.
So you've got micro pipettes,
and
a fancy magnifier that you're working underneath in order to see everything you need to see.
Yep.
And
specialty prongs to open up everything. So there's a lot of it's a relatively expensive equipment. I think about there are different levels of it, but the high end stuff is like $3,000, and the middle of the road's probably $1,000.
I'd always heard several $1,000s.
And then like the Alibaba stuff's probably $700, and it will maybe break.
And Purdue is the one reliable location you know of that offers classes on. Now that you've bought, so I was under the impression that you could go there and they had the equipment set up, and you could show up and go through the process of collecting your drones and extracting your drones and then actually inseminating some queens, and they had all that available for you to do, and that was included in the hefty price you pay for the education of how to do all this. But you're saying
I don't think that's the truth.
I think show up with your brand new
equipment,
several $1,000 machine, with no idea how to use it,
or you should have some idea of. right? This is not an introduction to beekeeping thing.
I'll just buy one of these off of Temu, and I'll get into this.
No, this is not a small time thing. This is not, I'm going to raise 10 queens. This is, I'm going to raise 100 to thousands, 300 to thousands. And my take, and I was actually thinking about doing all of this going into like next year and artificial, it's not artificial insemination, but it's instrumental insemination for bees, and doing all of this. And after watching this presentation with Cory, I decided to work on my open mating portion instead. So I will have open mated queens that I'm going to work on. I still plan on doing this year, but I will not. And grafting and doing grafting and doing open mating, which means that the bees technically she can mate with anybody.
Yeah.
And in her mating with anybody, her genetics may be different. And this is a recessive gene that we're looking for. So within 3 generations, they said, if you did the open mating and it was poorly done, you would no longer have hygienic behavior in your bees.
But it also sort of puts in perspective how, the queens that are raised off of these inseminated queens are surprisingly reasonably priced. They're not hundreds of dollars for one of the daughters, right? You would expect after going through all of this process for the mother queen that her offspring would be.
Now, they do have those, right? There's different grades of queen, and there are ones that you can buy, like the really expensive Purdue certified. We've tested things, and this is a string 1 queen, right? They have that. You can do that. It always scares me to death with those because if I squish my queen accidentally, and
there's nothing that makes these queens somehow different from all of the mistakes we make with our backyard raised queens.
Yeah, they're not bulletproof.
No,
they're not squish proof.
No, they're not. So
they're not negative 25-degree wind chill proof. It doesn't work like that.
The other thing that we're going to talk about a little bit was a talk that Randy Oliver gave, talking about some of the things that updates that he's sort of done around his varroa management.
Yeah, so every year, so this is the second year I've gone to this. In the first year, I accidentally sat in on a talk on varroa mite, and I was mad because I sat in the middle of the room ready for this presentation, and I don't even remember what the presentation I was supposed to go to was, but I sat in the middle of the room being like, all right, this is going to be great. And the first slide came up was varroa mites, and I was like, oh, really? I got the wrong room. I'm sitting right in the middle, right in front of the speaker, and I didn't want to leave. And so I sat there and listened to it, and I've listened to so many presentations on mites, right? It feels like every single class you ever go to.
I feel like every episode we talk about mites.
Every episode we talk about mites.
I get tired of talking about mites.
And so this year I was like, you know what? I'm going to go for all the people that study mites. I would guess Randy Oliver is in the top 25%, maybe 10% of.
I would say 10%. This is the Randy Oliver of scientific beekeeping for everybody who's following along at home.
Yeah, and the dude's done tons of mite washes and has done tons of research and a lot of stuff that we know about how to treat mites or stuff that works, like alcohol wash.
I think the stuff that works and the stuff that the average backyard beekeeper is doing to try to manage their mite loads are probably methods that are can point directly to the work that Randy has done.
Well, and it's not, hey, I feel like this works. It is, here's a scientific information with the level of certainty that this process works or does not.
Yeah, his data isn't ones and twosies, right? He's got properly deep data point, for how many hives I have tested this on, and how many do I have in this group? Because remember, for doing proper research, right? You're just not dealing with a group, right? You're dealing usually with one or two groups and a control group, right? Something you don't mess with,
right?
And so not only do you have to have 10 or 15 or 20 in this group or in that second group, but you also have to have 10 or 20 hives that you're willing to just sort of give up with and do whatever Mother Nature wants to do with. Right. And so that's why properly scientific, right, properly good research on these methods, why it takes years and hundreds of colonies to do stuff.
And it's meaningful.
This guy who does this, and so he gets up there and talks about the latest and greatest of what he's, I guess, been working on for the last year.
For what he's been working on the last year and breakthroughs that he's had, there was not a lot of surprises there for me in it. So if you can't tell, I'm a big fan of somebody that approaches beekeeping with a scientific mindset and provable data sets. I think Steve and I can agree on that as particularly as engineers, right? There shouldn't be. There's a lot of emotion in beekeeping.
It's a background in engineering, but also recognizing the amount of subjective emotional impact that people bring to it, because they get attached to it and they feel like their method of whatever is the best because they're emotionally attached to it, as opposed to some sort of rigorous background backing up what they're doing.
Right. Yeah. And so a few things that I found out that he does that I thought was interesting. So he was one of the people that first said, hey, 95%, I believe, isopropyl alcohol is what you need to use for correct attachment of the varroa mite from the bees.
So back up. When we do mite counts,
right,
we're going to take a sample of bees and then
half a cup of bees.
Yeah. And we've said for a while that we have always questioned the accuracy of your mite count based on how effective the wash portion of the check does. So you collect your bees, you put them some way, you have to separate the mites that are attached to the bees somehow. And we have postulated in the past that people that have reoccurringly low counts may just be doing a poor job in the wash step of the check, and you just don't get the mites to detach from the bees. And if you never get them to detach from the bees, you look at your solution when you're done, nothing floats in nothing sinks in your solution. I've got healthy bees, and then they still wind up having problems with their hives.
Yeah. And
you start looking for where you have holes, and we've sort of felt that when doing this process, one of the weak points that is hard to communicate is the wash portion of the mite check. And so he has a new take on how to get more effective results with that.
Yeah, and also I agree with everything Steve said. The other part of it is that a lot of those mites on adult bees, think of bees' exoskeleton as like a layered armor system, and the mites to feed on the body of the bee have to kind of slip in between those plates of armor underneath, and that's where they tend to live. So it's not like just sitting on top of the bee. They have to actually sneak in and get access to that. So that's part of the detachment problem too. So traditionally what we've been taught is you kill the bees, or we call it a wash, but you're killing the bees in whatever solution you're going to use.
Again, there are people that you could try to do this with a powdered sugar or something. A powdered sugar roll is usually what they've heard.
Yeah.
But again, we feel like the detachment factor there is significantly less than if you were to do a proper killing wash.
And I think you still kill those bees. It's just a longer, more painful death rather than an immediate one, just because of the amount of shaking you have to do to get those mites to dislodge.
I would put, one of the games I like to play is Wits and Wagers, which is a game where you ask a question and you get to put an answer on the table and bet on it.
Yeah.
I'd put a lot of my chips on that answer.
Yeah. So You end up, we call it washing the bees, but you'll end up killing those bees with, he uses Dawn and water now, and I don't know the percentages, but he has it on his website. And I traditionally have used rubbing alcohol, high levels of percentage of rubbing alcohol, which during COVID was really, one, if you had it on hand, it was really expensive. And if you didn't and you needed to get it, it is really expensive.
It didn't used to be, and
Right.
then COVID hit, and then it became hard to get, and the price really shot up.
Yeah.
And during those times, I used windshield washer fluid.
Yeah.
Because it also had a high alcohol, like a 25% alcohol content. And I kind of liked the blue tint.
Yeah.
In terms
shows
of
up, they makes things show up.
Yeah.
Well. So he uses Dawn and water, and lets them. Well, let's start at the beginning of the process. So the first thing he does is he grabs a frame of bees, which is adjacent to the hive. I guess hive body, larva body. Where they're raising all of the baby bees.
You said open brood.
Yeah,
previously.
open brood. Because that's where the varroa mites reproduce in that open brood. So if you go back to our episode on varroa mites, we talk about it. We talk about it pretty extensively. So he takes one adjacent to that because he has a lesser chance of grabbing the queen and doing that. Now, I in all the washes that I've done, I don't think I have grabbed a queen. I may have rolled a queen, but I have pulled frames with queens on them and said, "Oh, oops, there's the queen," and I'll set that frame usually aside and then grab another frame of open brood with workers on it and shake that because then I don't have a chance of grabbing a queen. But anyway, he was saying that he goes through and grabs an adjacent to the hive, the brood body of part of the hive, shakes those into a box, and counts to 3, like a 3-second. He called it a 3B count, but count to 3, count to 5. The flyers will fly away. The worker bees that can't fly,
Nurse bees
that can't fly are stuck there, and then you take your half cup of nurse bees and put them into a container and where they are exposed to the alcohol or the Dawn, they die immediately. And then you wait a full minute, before doing a gentle swirl/shake. So what we were taught originally was you put them in there and then you shake it for a minute, 2 minutes. I think it's a minute.
A minute
hard.
So one of the points I brought up in our pre-talk was the easy mite check, which is the most commonly used apparatus for doing this that I know of. I know it's the one we've given away the most. It's the one I would use.
Yeah.
It has a clear delineation between a little basket the bees sit in and a reservoir of about 1.5 inches of water fluid material below that. And if I recall, the fill lines on that apparatus would indicate that the two don't touch on their own. So if you were just to sit it on the table, the bees would be suspended completely outside the liquid. And so the shaking portion was important in order to get all of the contents of the shaker of the apparatus wet and submerged and killed.
So maybe I didn't pay attention enough, but I always filled mine to the fill, just under the fill line of where the bees are. So I used a lot of rubbing alcohol in order to do that.
So I guess that's because every time I've seen it used, there's only about 1.5 inches of fluid.
Yeah, I used to do that, and then it was too annoying to put the lid on and keep the ones from crawling out and not cutting somebody in half with the lid and stuff, right? So I just would dump them in, and then they would just hit the rubbing alcohol and be dead.
And the difference here is Randy's setup. He has an inner cup and an outer cup, and again, the inner cup is intended to strain the large bees from the fluid, but they nest close enough together that the bees are soaking for that entire 1 minute in his solution.
Right.
And I think that's a key difference there is the amount of time that our collected sample of bees has to be the mites have in contact with our killing solution, whether
Right.
that's water or alcohol water mix.
So the things that I picked up were a gentle swirling. Well, one was the minute wait, right? That was new to me, and kind of makes sense. Like it gives, if they're floating in there, it makes sense that they detach slowly in that. And then the other one was that he doesn't shake the hell out of them like I have been taught and do. It was a gentle swirling motion, but still for a minute. So he still swirls them, still did it for a minute. And that was something new to me because you will find, when you shake the hell out of them, you find stingers, you find bits of leg, antenna. And if you're not used to looking at those things and going, oh, that's what that is, and that's what that is, then you can be confused. I have given it to new beekeepers and said, how many mites are in here? And the answer you get is 20. And you
15,
go,
20,
yeah,
30.
And you go and take a look at it, and you're like, what's going on? And so you look, and you found 2, maybe 3. Yeah.
And one of the students gave me an easy mite check with unannounced soapy water in it, and I proceeded to shake it as if it was an alcohol or a window washer fluid, and within seconds, the
foam.
entire thing was full of foam, and you couldn't get, like, everything was just, like, the foam was dense enough that everything was suspended in the foam, so you couldn't even check at the end because nothing would settle out, right? And so we ended up having to basically wash it down and try to get the foam out. And so I think his gentle swirl with the Dawn solution is his response to not overly agitating the material.
The cups too fit inside of each other, and so you can't hard shake cups that have an open mouth to them.
Right.
It just doesn't work. The other thing, and he didn't say it during this presentation, but I'd seen it, and I thought I'd seen it from him from other presentation, was he separates his different hive samples into Ziploc bags.
Hold on. He retains his samples afterwards for each hive. So normally, if we're to do 2 samples in the yard, we would take our sample, do the whole thing, the whole process, and give it a minute, let it sit, do the check, hold it up to the light, do our count, and then dump everything out, refill, and then go to our second hive or our third hive and repeat the entire process. But the point is, the contents of the first check wound up on the ground when we were done.
Yeah.
And the difference here was...
So the difference here is actually you would take the check, the whole check, put it in the bag, and then not do it in the yard. Do it at home.
Right.
So you take it home. So it's been sitting in this fluid for however hours, right?
Yeah.
And you're not doing it outside in 100-degree weather. You're doing it in air conditioned, nice 70 degrees.
Why is it 100 degrees, Luke?
Because you're doing it during the summer.
August, when you're supposed to be doing your mite checks.
Well, June, July, August, all of that time frame, right? So you have an understanding of where your hives are. April, if they make it through winter and their population's good, technically you should be doing one there too. If you look at his... So he has actually made a calculator on scientificbeekeeping.com that you can put in your first day of spring and all of that stuff, and it'll tell you, hey, this is when you need to treat. So it's much easier. Part of this presentation is also it's much easier to treat and keep your values low than it is to fix runaway populations.
Try to knock down,
right? And so it's an important takeaway as a beginner beekeeper is don't chase your problems, right? Sometimes you need to go and head your problems off early. And that's true with mites. That's true with your queens, right? Like I've got a poor laying queen and I'm trying to nurse her through. Right? I'm guilty of that. I'm like, oh, no, she'll be fine. I'm not, she has
give her another friend brood. All she's missing is some workers.
Yeah, it's been, this is after it's been 4 weeks. It's been a month. All my other hives are exploding. This one is just it'll be okay. Like, she'll recover. She'll recover. No, just pinch her. Move on. Pinch the queen. Get another one. Move along. And understand that you're doing the hive a benefit by doing so. So, including...
You'll be a more successful beekeeper.
Yeah, you'll be a more successful beekeeper.
But I tell you what, for as long as I've been doing it, because I started watching some commercial guys several years ago, and my biggest takeaway was how aggressive they were in requeening.
Oh, yeah.
And because I was never that aggressive in requeening, right? Because I was exactly what you said. Hive limps along, that's fine, whatever. I'm not here to make money, right? This is just a hobby. But the point is, at the end of the day, those are never the hives that make it through winter. No. And I'm always the guy standing there in the apiary in March looking at all my failures going, well, gosh darn it, what could I have done different?
Right.
And the difference is you could have been more aggressive in the previous spring on culling those weak colonies early so that you have a nice full productive year to have a productive hive, whether you're making splits or honey, whatever your definition of productive is for your apiary.
Yeah.
But the point is, at the end of the year, you got strong hives that overwinter the best.
Well, and Kelly will tell you, like I'm a crabby man when around March, and actually even in October and March and April. I am a crabby beekeeper. I really want to say that I'm like super excited and happy, but every hive that I lose, I take it very personally. Right, me and the mites. I have a personal vendetta against mites. I respect mites immensely, but my personal vendetta against them is extreme. So I guess my takeaway, if you've listened this long and you have any takeaway from this, take some time to go out and look at scientificbeekeeping.com. You don't have to believe it. You can be treatment free, all the other stuff, but at least go out and take a look at it. It's worth a perusing.
You can be treatment free, but still do mite checks to figure out where you're at.
I agree, but sometimes there's this is a topic.
I guess it's easier to believe that you don't have any problems if you never check, right?
Is that how that works?
Also, let's not forget we also have our upcoming spring nukes that we're going to be offering for sale. If you're out there listening and you're in the Central Illinois area, and you want a nuke, 5-frame nuke, that we're going to be getting from
in the April timeframe.
Yep.
I actually spent some time just because I haven't purchased these nukes before. Neither Steve or I have, and I actually talked to a guy, an older fellow, 82 years old, that has purchased these nukes for years, and his response was he's never had an issue with them. He actually wanted to talk a lot about beekeeping. Really nice guy, but the takeaway from it was he's never had an issue with these. The main issue that he has is that many new beekeepers that buy this don't understand, and we talked about this in the previous episode, don't understand that this is a hive that is going to explode when you're putting these in. So he said his main complaint is, from people usually, is that they are, if you're not on top of it, they can swarm.
Yeah, swarmed or outgrew your equipment a little way quicker because the 5-frame nukes that we expect to be supplied based on video we've seen from the past are just booming, and you'll need to stay on top of them. You'll need to have two, they obviously need to go into your single deep right away and then have your second deep available and ready to go. This isn't something you can just sort of limp along like a package for the first month.
Right. And this will be, and they're on my website on riverviewroadapiary.com. If you look there, that is not a picture of that I just randomly got or of one of my packages. That is a package from the supplier that they provided us.
That should be somewhat indicative of what we expect to get this year.
So right now we're bringing in like 50 of them. With our current order loads,
we've got reservations up to as many as 200.
Yep.
And if we don't pull that many, we'll probably be picking them up ourselves. But either way, we're going to have them here in April. So if you're interested, now's the time to sign up. I think we're cutting off our orders.
End of February is when I was told.
Yeah. So it's only about a month from now. So only a couple episodes between now and then. Also coming up on the calendar is the beginning beekeeping class for our local club. If you're in the area of Central Illinois and you need a local beginner beekeeping class to attend, that's coming up on February 1st. So it's just a couple weeks from now, from when we're recording this. And you posting this?
I'm going to get this probably posted by tomorrow. Actually,
by this week.
Yeah,
so you'll still have a week or more to sign up for that class. I think we still have a lot of open spots for that. So
we do. And if you can't make it to ours, SIBA's also having their Central Illinois Beekeeping in Bloomington. Those guys also be having theirs.
No, I thought theirs was this weekend or last weekend or something.
Oh, maybe it's this week.
Because it was like the 25th, and we were wanting to do the 25th, and then we didn't want to be on top of each other, so we pushed ours.
Oh, okay.
Which will be real tight by the time you hear this, but if you're motivated, you could probably still make that one also if you're over closer to Bloomington in the Central Illinois region. And if not, and you're interested in new beekeeping, there's plenty of other beginner beekeeping classes out there, probably associated with your local club. I know there's one in St. Louis, there's one up in Michigan, there's one in Ohio. So there's plenty of other locations that offer beginner beekeeping classes right about this time of year across the country.
Yep. Just to be clear, it'll be January 25th, and I will do my utmost to get this published before then so that you can still make that this weekend.
So if you found the last of our talk here today to be entertaining and interesting, you got to hang in for the upcoming episodes. We're going to go into some more detail on Troleopsis.
Tropilaleps.
Tropilaleps.
Mites. If you want to go for short, mites.
Tropy mites,
which scare me
and
no end.
That like if you thought varroa mites were bad, Trippy mites are like 10 times worse, apparently.
Yeah, tropy mites are not 10 times, or I would say 1,000 times more deadly.
And so we're going to have a discussion. That was another session that you sat through and got some good information on. That you just leave the room going, we're doomed. We're all doomed.
I actually left the room, and my wife had just shown up to the conference because she went with me. With our bulldog. Bulldog went too, and we went there, and my head was hanging, and she was like, "What's going on?" And I was like, "I just went through this presentation on the pests that are going to be showing up, and I am not sure I want to continue to be a beekeeper after all of that stuff." So it'll be a sad one.
So upcoming, we're going to talk about there was a really good talk about bee nutrition, and so we're going to talk about some of the real positive takeaways on how to impact your bee nutrition through various pollens. That ties in well with our episode number 17. So if you want a little background before you get to that episode, go back and listen to our episode 17 to get caught up on how nutrition impacts our hives. We'll also be talking about
native pollinators
and
the impact on honeybees on native pollinators. We're probably talking about some UBO. We're going to talk about some vaccination stuff with one of the workers from the AFB vaccination labs from Dallon.
We hope to have some guests on. Bob Benny gave a talk on how he moved from 8 hives to 800.
Yep, and actually he was a speaker at the our Illinois State Beekeepers Association, and during that he's very approachable. I talked to him and asked him if he'd mind coming on, so he'll be on the show. He has agreed to it. We just need to set up a time for him, probably before spring comes on much further, because he's going to be a busy guy.
So if you're interested in all these things, you got to stay tuned and catch us on future episodes of Beekeeping Buddies. I'm Steven.
And I'm Luke.
Thanks for listening.